All right, so number two, keeping it loose. Here we are again. We're talking about resilience. This is Between a Rock and a Hard Place with Dr. Koberstein and John Salati. So here we go.
So I think when we're talking about resilience, we're talking about the ability for you to create a new status quo for yourself, either the ability to, the completion of. All right. Sometimes when we're talking about resilience, we have to be careful. You can be resilient without having to be stretched to your limit yet,
Yeah,
and you can remain resilient until you can't achieve something on the first try. And again, you're still resilient because you're spooling.
yeah.
So.
The only reason that resilience kind of comes up is when something goes wrong, right?
Yeah, often that's one of the myths of resilience. Some things that you're resilient in, you're not going to perceive. You just do it. You have very well planned out autonomous patterns that kick in and allow you to kind of turn that corner, whatever analogy you want to use. We also have to have resilience for some of the big things. But in between those are a medley of all sorts of different experiences, trials, tribulations.
Yeah,
We're not just talking about trauma and really, really large
yeah, like
events that,
family death or
right, things that take a whole host of different strategies than some of the ones that we possess. Some that we may even perhaps learn strategies anew.
now. What's that one analogy that you use about boats?
So the whole concept is for you to think of like the body as a vessel, to kind of use that term. The vessel's the ship, right? Synonyms there. That ship is great and it gets new capabilities as you use the ship and you learn more about the ship, right? The ship can become something, all new and updated as you start to grow through life. Now you have to be able to sail that ship, which means you also have to go through the experiences and learning processes of how to orient it in the seas, how to utilize wind. And you can do all of those things, and that's what typical development looks like. But as we all know, you've probably seen Perfect Storm, one of my favorite movies, Go Mark Wahlberg,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It doesn't always go well on the high seas. And so you're going to have to put up with any number of weird factors along the way, right? Scurvy,
yeah,
wind dying down,
yeah.
accidentally sailing into the Arctic, all sorts of
Yeah.
crazy things with explorers, which is the same as living life, really.
Yeah, there's a famous
Different
book. There's
scales.
a famous book that I'm sure a lot of readers know called Endurance. So they, crashed their ship in the Arctic Circle, and so they travel back over mountains, and none of them actually die, and that's like an amazing example of resilience.
Right.
Because whether it's like a life or death situation, or even just an everyday situation,
Right, the
you're able to,
corollaries, right? Somebody, getting their boat blown over in Canandaigua Lake or Cuba Lake,
yeah,
right?
the,
That's kind of the big parallel polarities,
it,
but it's like that.
there's still whether or not you want to think about severity of an example, uh, there's still everyday uses or everyday things you should be observant of for your resilience.
Right. Resilience, when you're coming into college, is going to take on a completely different meaning, too. Because here you're talking a little bit more towards social resilience, the ability to experience discomfort, awkwardness.
Yeah, like
Right.
going to a party or going to the first NSO or just meeting your new roommates. Just
There's just
everyday thing in class. If you need help in class, you may be anxious to ask someone next to you.
to show up at a professor's office hours,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
or like talk to someone you're attracted to, or stuff like that. Everyday things.
Well, it makes me think of the term that we talk about, cognitive comfort.
Yeah,
This kind of ability to rest in those uncomfortable situations, those experiences of disorientation. By other theories, we call it chaos, right? When a foreign element, something you haven't experienced, is kind of shoved your way, and it knocks you into that kind of zone of flux. You're floating around, you don't know what to do. Your ability to like sit in that state is one of those crucial factors of resilience.
yeah,
To be able to tolerate that, because you learn that environment and you'll get better at understanding what comes before it, right?
yeah. Being a
What
little bit
happens
predictive.
inside. Yeah. And so that's a lot of what we need to get at there. We're not just talking about bouncing back.
Yeah.
We're also talking about more stability factors, kind of overall lifetime experiences, lifetime growth, even purpose, for instance.
One of the things that Carl Jung talks about is a famous quote called "In filth it will be found." I like this quote a lot because there's at times where whether it's trauma down the road, or even now in social events in college, there's some things that you're not gonna like doing that you must feel that is necessary, or at least think is necessary.
Yeah, the best leaders in life are the ones who understand what it is to be the most bottom person on their staff or in their organization. They're people who can empathize in those functions, people who have had experiences there, so that they can grow and see their own potential, and people who can really experience any number of different events. That just builds up that experience that they have. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what you get. It's down in the mud where you get all of the experience.
Yeah. So when you have that experience, and we also want to make sure that we're talking about the relationships, in the filth, I guess you could say, because you're never alone, right? You need a team, you need a tribe, as Dr. McKenzie would say.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the crew and wrap around to that boat analogy.
Yeah, so we talked about the ship, right? You're the vessel, you know how to maneuver it, you're starting to learning the high seas, and we talked about all the different issues that can kind of run amok during these journeys. Well, that's where you need a seasoned crew. Nobody can do these things on their own. I mean, you show me somebody who can sail one of those old wooden ships, right? Think about that. No way. And the captain just shouted things at people, right? I only know stuff from like Mutiny on the Bounty and like really bad sailing movies, but
I'm sure like everyone would only think of Jaws.
yeah, right? And so we need to have individuals with capacities that can help us. We need a support group, a supporting staff, right? Those people who are just there for you. And each one of them is going to serve a function. Now, it sounds kind of like people collecting, but it's relationship collecting. Don't think for a second that relationships go one way, right? They should, by all means, go both ways.
Yeah.
We want to be accepting of people, accepting of faults. We want to be able to help our friends. All of those types of relationships are what kind of starts rounding out that support group.
It's interesting when you get to college because you will have sort of a second family when you go to college. We've done a lot of work on sense of belonging. Angie Champagne, shout out to an alum, has done a lot of work on sense of belonging. And the basis of it is that when you come to college, you start to form this second family. There's the so-called mom of the family. There's the crazy uncle.
Yep.
There's you got everybody. And what starts to happen is you kind of align yourself with this group, and you start to really diversify yourself. And it allows other people to diversify with you. So it helps you, bring some joy into college. It helps you have bonds when you need it. When you're feeling really low, there's someone in your tribe who can help you. And when someone in your tribe is feeling really low, you may be the person who can help them. That's very important when coming into college, especially the first 6 weeks. You're all in it together. You're very vulnerable. It's very purposeful to bond and form a tribe.
And we got to remind people that part of being in a tribe is that kind of self-care portion, right? You can't take care of others unless you yourself are in that stable place. And we have to be careful about how we care for others as well. We don't want to justify enabling, right? We don't want to justify dangerous positions that people have.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we don't want to make anything worse incidentally.
Yeah.
What we do want to do is allow people to have space. And space is probably one of the most important things that we can talk about in life in general. Space is a really important concept. Space to fill with the emotions that they have and their feelings and allow them to have it. If you experience my human development class at all while you're here at CUCA, you'll do an M&M activity with, and I can't give away exactly what happens in there, because that's part of the con, right? That's part of the good part. That's the learning. That's surprise. But the activity is really about allowing people to have their own space and their own kind of right to their emotions.
Yeah.
I get to feel however I want. I don't need validation. I don't need permission. It's how I feel. And your job as a support person would be to allow me to experience that, explore that until I come up with that function, right?
Yeah, I think it kind of, when you're talking about no judgment, I mean, look, you're going to be judgmental of yourself and of others. It's that's a given. Um, but I want to talk more about avoiding negative outlets.
Yeah, some of this stuff can be as simple as like your intent to send out a cathartic meme, something that is pseudo cathartic. It does make you feel better. It almost justifies the pain in a way.
Now, when you say cathartic, just kind of explain cathartic.
So cathartic would be the release, right? Your release of anger through some means, right? It could be you going outside when you're angry and shouting at the top of your lungs if it restores your anger. That's cathartic.
Or like in health class, you've been told to like punch a pillow or something.
Right. Now, in psychology, we look at precision and catharsis rather than just kind of anecdotal observation type of catharsis. And so when I say pseudo-cathartic, what I'm talking about there is on the surface, if you just observed, it would look cathartic, but within the psyche, within the ego, it's not actually serving that function.
Let's talk about finding purpose.
I mean, this is what we're doing in this course, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what we mean by the term thrive. It's not going to look alike. Some of you are going to do it differently than others and come to differing points in how you thrive.
I know how it feels in college, or how it may feel in high school, where everyone's trying to do the same thing. There's a lot of your friends who are trying to go to college, and there's a lot of your friends who aren't trying to go to college. So you guys feel like you're having the same purpose. And when you get to college, it's much different. You're the one who's going through college alone. Like you're the individual. You're the individual that gets the grades. You're the individual that gets the degree, and gets the experience in college. It's only you. Your purpose is going to be completely different from someone else's. Even your own friend, even your own roommate, even the person who's in your major that's the same, or who may want to go to the same grad school. You must find your individual purpose, which is not easy by any means.
I like to think of it kind of like high school's you being in a boy band.
Yeah.
Like, I'm an old guy, so I grew up with NSYNC.
Uh-huh.
So you remember NSYNC? They all looked alike, but they looked different, right? That's a lot what we have in that early adolescence time period, right? We have high group identifications. We're doing things very similar to other people because that's how we start to learn. In college, it's all about kind of breaking out with your solo album.
Yeah.
Your sound's going to be different. I mean, tell me Justin Timberlake sounded the same in NSYNC as he does now or on his own. You can't make that argument.
I didn't know until like a year ago that Justin Timberlake was in sync. So.
Oh God. That's what we're working on in this course, right? This kind of breakout. Like this is kind of a cool way for you to walk in the doors, and learn a little bit more about that. Understand what some of the barriers are probably going to be already. Be proactive with those. We set up a fairly robust course that's open to us being able to be used, consulted for anything that you all need.
There's a lot of self-discovery in this course, and it should be that way throughout college. We talked about in the last module, we just hinted it on having a flexible goal.
Yeah, and it's not even really a goal, it's more of an orientation.
Yeah.
You guess the goal would be like exactly where you want to end up, but like
the odds that you end there are practically zero.
You're right, and like the ship, right?
Yeah.
We take a heading.
Yeah.
But we don't go in a straight line. And think about any time you're hearing about somebody take a journey. One of my favorite things about reading was the journeyman, right? The hero stories, the people who had this open outlook and all of these different trials and tribulations step up, and some of them take them one way and they don't necessarily navigate it well, and some take them another positive way. And here, all along the way, they're confronting all of these things, being hopeful, accepting change. There's always that one kind of tiny perspective, right? I think of like Frodo in Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
Him and Samwise Gamgee just like thought about the Shire the whole time, right? And that was kind of their perspective, that hopeful outlook. Like, if we can just get back there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the cool part about growing. Speaking of resilience, I could tell you I would have done my college career completely different if I did it again. It's tough to look back, and while I say that, I wouldn't change the life I had for anything. But I really didn't pick up on this train where you all are. I'm an accomplished college dropout. I was very blessed to have privileges in my life. One of those was to have parents who had the capability to pick me up and send me back to college, even though I wasted their money, right? We can't rely on those types of things. And so a lot of what we're trying to do here is to try to get away from those missteps, try to help where I can, which is really one of the big things here. Helping other people is my way to step out and try to stop you from doing something that won't work. Beyond that, you have the support of this group right now for this 4-week time period that we're in this class. At this point, when you're listening to this, you'll have about 3 weeks left. That's 3 weeks that you have open access to not only the TAs in our class, but also your mentor group, all of the functions of NSO, and lots of people there with that outreach.
I like to use the analogy of, and this is just something to think about. I mean, unless you actually want to do it, go right ahead. It'll help you. To take a list out of your day, at the end of your day, kind of reflect back and think about the positive and negative words that you used throughout the day, and see if you actually ended net positive or ended net negative. One of the things we want to kind of make a point to about resilience is, even if you think you're trying to go through a situation with resilience, over a long period of time, if you're not talking to yourself proactively or reaching a net positive, even in your language, your psyche isn't going to do the same either.
Right.
So how about elaborate on language?
I think that's a perfect point also to talk about, your perceptions, what you see yourself doing. We have all manner of ways to trick ourselves. Protecting our ego is big, and one of the ways we do it is by masking our language sometimes.
Yeah.
Other times it's ignoring certain things and not perceiving the way we're speaking in certain regards, right? Projecting that we're doing more than we actually are. And so I think this idea of taking data, right, and actually seeing is one of those things that can make you a more resilient person. Essentially what you're doing there is you're talking straight to yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And making sure that you're especially being kind. There's one thing talking straight to yourself, in kind of that
third person
Yeah.
that we were talking about before. So, like, if you've ever taken the time, like in a conversation, I know everyone has, where you take that third person and you're like, whoa, like, why are you lying right now? Like, are you like peacocking? Or are you just saying that to like show off? Sometimes taking that third person and, say, being micro-critical of your language can really find out who you are, what you're actually about.
Yeah, we have to be careful about how we use kind of hostile humor on ourselves.
It's
The debilitating jokes, right? We want to take care of ourselves, and one of the ways we do that is by using our language.
like, I get it. One of the sociable things that you can do to make friends is a good tactic is to kind of dismantle yourself or kind of downplay yourself, make you feel more approachable, to not look as cocky or confident or intimidating. It's a good strategy. It is. It has its purpose. But when you're continually doing that throughout the day, and people do that, everyone falls fault to it. That can be alarming.
Yeah, you want to be using your language not as a tool to kind of inflict further pain or just to deflect pain. Instead, you want to be using your language to label what's happening, more in that data insightful way. Part of the time we spend going through different experiences, we have to take to identify what the things at play are, what actually is happening to us. And so we want to be using our language as a tool of discovery rather than a weapon that can be used either through conflict with others. I know myself when I experience problems, I am often to become angry and kind of vent.
Yep.
It's a difficult thing to process through, but when you start being able to use language to talk about what you're experiencing, it gives you more of an opportunity to harness it. I know we talked about strengths.
Yeah.
We talked about how your emotions are endless as long as you can put a name to it.
Yeah.
So we don't have to use standardizations. Instead, we just have to call them something.
Let's talk about having a hopeful outlook.
I mean, this is one of the
It's like,
most important things that you can kind of possess as a personality characteristic. And luckily, it's one that can be trained, learned. It's one that you can start to gain, which is really cool. Having hope means understanding in who you are, having that understanding of potential.
yeah, who you can be.
Yeah, well, and a lot of times when we go through issues, we discount how we got out of them, how we got through them. Because to us, we're just trying, and they're not marked time frames, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at any character in any book, it's not an epic to them, it's life as is in front of them at that moment. Right? It could stick out in the whole sum of their lives as a time period, but then when they were going through it, they were just in it. And so when you look at all of those experiences, you start to realize just what those capabilities you have are.
I think it's also useful to like just to sit for a moment and contemplate your immortality, so to speak.
Yeah,
I mean, I like to use the analogy of you can make two decisions in life. You can either continue to suffer, or you can choose to triumph, or at least attempt to triumph your suffering. That kind of is akin to responsibility, kind of picking up in the largest rock that you're capable of picking up, taking on that burden willingly. It's a lot better to do it willingly than when you're 40 and you're forced to. Um, that's it's a very big issue that when I'm talking to alumni or I'm talking to just other people in occupations, especially when you're in your field period, here's a straightforward answer. You will see people who aren't happy in their job, and that's a sad thing because they allowed it to happen to themselves.
yeah. Well, I mean, the tough thing that you have to remember that's out there is that you don't have to stay where you are. You can have movement. You can have change. There is nothing without you creating opportunity. And if you dislike something, that means it's time to create new opportunity.
Yeah.
And, and this sounds like a reach, and I don't mean to make it sound easy. It's not. It's as muddy as Carl Jung would have described it,
Yeah.
right? It is being in the filth at moments. But we have to remember what our strengths are in that if we do something, we can do it again. We can bring things up. We have changed numerous times in the world. There's some hard pressing issues in front of us now. We remain hopeful because we understand that we have capabilities like that. If you have your crew on your boat, you know what you can do. You know what support's there. You know what those people are good at. If each one of us has a crew of 10 people we know that are just awesome, supportive people, imagine what we have as a large group out there that exists that is great in this world. And that's kind of where I gain hope.
And it's really not that far of a reach. I like to use this networking thing. So you may think that you don't really have an impact on another person across the world, and that's simply not the case. In your lifetime, you'll grow to know 1,000 people at least, especially with social media. You'll grow to know at least 1,000 people, and that means that you're one person away from a million. It's 1,000 times 1,000. Do the math, and then that means that you're two persons away from a billion. Now that's insane because just one little impact can alter someone else's decision. So that means that your decisions matter what you make. if your decisions actually matter what you make, then you must take into retrospect that if I'm not resilient in this example, who's watching? If I'm not resilient in this situation, who's watching? You think of all the famous people. If Kevin Hart broke his back, he broke his back, and he said, "Yeah, I'm just gonna lay down and die in this hospital bed." He was that close. Now, what are everyone who followed Kevin Hart's footsteps gonna think? You'd be surprised how
I don't
much your
think they
impact.
know Kevin Hart, right? But think about that. There's purpose beyond what's there in that moment, a fleeting moment of time when something goes on. That doesn't end anything. The purpose still could be out there within that orientation you're moving towards,
Yeah.
right? Your ultimate thing. It's not something that immediately turns on. I mean, I'll tell you what, like you don't find your career in your junior year of high school and decide everything about your life from that point. I'm
thought-
sorry, you
I tried. Didn't. It's not the way out.
you don't. And the good thing is you have that orientation, so you're not stuck. But you have to be understanding of when it's time to pivot, right? When it's time to go that other way, change that route. You can't be fixed to it. And that's what we get at kind of in hope. Hope is one of the most important things that we have in order to change. We need to be able to, in some situations, have something bad happen and have something bad happen on top of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to be able to weather something bad happening and our response to that bad thing happening, right? Because
Right.
we're not gonna hit it every time.
Yeah.
And so, if we have hope, what we don't do is we don't stop moving. We don't stay stagnant.
Yeah.
We don't allow the ship to go down, so to speak, or for it to fall into disrepair. We keep it, and there may be parts of that ship that are fundamentally different when we're done. But as long as we keep our journey moving, I think we get out of it what we put in.
There's a good water analogy. The water's either stagnant or it's moving. So what do we got cooking up in this second module here?
So my favorite is side activity B. Personally, I'm a big fan of using social media
Yep.
in our courses. And so I've never done a TikTok before, so it sounds like fun. I hope you'll have some fun with us.
Yeah.
What we'll be doing for that one pretty awesome. We're going to be looking at a song, right? That's one of the components. So something that speaks to, your resilience, how you use somebody. It could be something that reminds you of like a person.
Like the song "Made It Through the Struggle." Yeah,
I don't know that one.
It's YWN Melly, but
I don't know who that is.
They'll know who it is. They'll know.
Okay.
Who it is. Yeah. So pick a song that's like that just speaks to you in a moment where you're like, you know what, I gotta listen to some like Eminem, or like I gotta listen to some Meek Mill, or just something that like gets
Your resilience
gets
jam,
you
right?
kind of built up, or like I don't know if you went through like a bad breakup or something, and you're like listening to some T Swift
Or like, what song's playing in the back of your head when you like trying to walk down the street all tough?
yeah.
Or like
you're trying to walk like a badass.
What do you all say? You and your crew roll up, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
But
Think about it. That's what we're talking about there. That's a good thing to harness in terms of resilience, right? What you're basically doing is you're putting that emotion, that feeling, capturing those moments, and being able to kind of recognize them in that song. The second part of TikTok is apparently I gotta dance in this.
yeah.
So that's where it's probably going to get a little bit ugly. I'm not very good at dancing. I'm going to go for it, so get ready for...
You've done it at our Halloween Palooza, so.
Yeah, I have. I've been known to cut a little bit of rug, right? The second activity, or the first activity, I should say,
Yeah.
is something that you cooked up, right?
Yeah, it's something that me and Courtney cooked up. It's called Get the Ball Rolling. The basis of it is, even down to the micro habit, you're able to do something. So we're looking at competency. Anywhere from a social experience to any action, such as going to a party. You can break down, no matter how anxious you feel, in order to become competent or become braver in it. And the literature has shown that if you're feeling anxious about something, you can't really change that. But what you can change is to become braver, to become the feeling of more competence in it, to go through with that action. you think about any phobia of like being scared of going into an elevator, or even being lazy enough to not clean off the water bottles in your room. You've obviously hindered yourself from doing it for some reason.
There's some block.
Yeah, there's some mental block that you have. So let's think about those. So what you'll do is you'll sit in your room and go from there, and you'll work on that and post about it.
Sometimes the first step is the one that you can't get done. So
Yeah.
what do you do? Let's go 2 steps before and get those done, right?
Yep.
First thing you put on your to-do list is something you already got done.
Yeah.
Get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Start change. Change is something that'll envelop you. It'll sweep you off your feet. Part of our resilience is being able to just start sometimes. Sometimes it's just understanding that there's one problem, one thing to overcome. We'll get the ball rolling with that. And then we have our Thrive activity this week,
Yes.
which I'm going to really enjoy reading. This is where you kind of write an introduction of yourself. This is an activity where we're asking you to do the VIA callback from last Rock and a Hard Place when we talked about strengths. This is the character inventory,
Yeah.
of Peterson Seligman, 300 items. Pretty robust, and it'll give you some ideas about that. We want you to utilize those. I've taken a post in Moodle for that activity, a little bit of help on how you can turn those strengths into things you would even put on a resume.
Yep.
And so taking that approach, that way you can at least build a little bit of fortitude and character on how you present yourself on your resume, how to produce those. So this is really learning how to quantify your strengths in a way, evidence them in a really good way, and I'm excited for you all to do that activity.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us. This is Between a Rock.
And a Hard Place,
We'll see you later.
later.